Closing arguments to vacate Christopher Dunn's murder conviction wrapped up about 45 minutes ago.
Hello, and welcome back to 1 Minute Remaining. My name is Jack Lawrence, the host and creator of this show. Today is part 3 of the story of Christopher Dunn, a man who has so far been incarcerated for over 3 decades for the murder of a 14-year-old boy back in 1990, named Rico Rogers. It's a crime Chris says he did not commit, and has been fighting for his freedom ever since. In our previous episode, Chris talked us through the debacle that was his public defender and the defence, which was non-existent. His court-appointed attorney made no effort, he says, to contact anyone who could back up his alibi as to where he was the night that Rico was shot and killed. The state would bring just 2 witnesses as their evidence, a boy of just 14 and one who was 12. They stated to police the night of the shooting that the triggerman was Christopher Dunn. The witness accounts not only didn't match, they were also highly inconsistent with the medical examiner's report as to how Rico was killed. Before Chris went to trial, it will be unsurprising to anyone that his attorney had initially tried to get him to just accept the state's plea. No doubt she obviously tried to convince you at one stage just to take a deal.
Yeah, she told me that the state had offered me 10 years. They offered me a 10-year deal if I pled guilty. Jack, I didn't commit the crime. It had been difficult for me to even sit there and tell this woman and tell this man that I killed their child when I didn't do it. I'm not going to sit there and take a 10-year deal for something I didn't do. If I did, I'd have been gone home. I've been locked up 34 years now. Back then, I would have done 4 to 5 years on a 10-year sentence. Just think, 29 years to 30 years ago, I would have been free.
This here is the very reason that the estimate of 20,000 wrongfully convicted people in the United States is just that, an estimate. There are so many more cases where people like Chris are brought a plea deal by their attorney, the person who they look to for advice, the one person who's supposed to be there to help them, and they come to their client, in this case, Chris, and say, look, this is a pretty good deal. If you take this to trial, you may never get home. At least this way, you get 10 years, you could be out in 4, and then you can get on with your life. How many people do you think would sit there and look at their options and say, my life in the hands of 12 strangers against the state and my defense, the possibility of never going home or just maybe 4 years? Fine, take the deal. People take those deals because they ultimately don't trust the system. They don't believe in it. Those who do, and who have believed the system would clear them, end up like Christopher Dunn, Evaristo Salas Jr., Damian Skinner, Temujin Kenzu, Tony Duke, Stephen Lawrence. The list goes on and on. Is there any part of you that regrets not taking that deal?
No, not one part. Just because I grew up in the inner city of St. Louis, I still grew up with the understanding of principle. I understood what it meant to have pride in who I was and the family that I come from. I understood what it meant to assume the responsibility of something that I didn't do. I'm not going to sit there just because you offered me a deal just to get it over with. I'm not going to do that. My life, my family life, who I am and what they were to me, means more to me than a deal.
Unsurprisingly, with Chris having absolutely no defence presented, his trial is finished in what must be record time.
My trial lasted a day and a half.
What?
A day and a half.
A day and a half for a murder trial.
A day and a half for a murder trial.
Oh my God, it just gets worse. A day and a half.
A day and a half for a murder trial.
And dare I ask how long the jury took to come back with a decision on it?
About 45 minutes.
Did you have any hope that they were going to come back with an innocent result?
That's all we can do is hope. But I'll be honest with you though. I lost hope in the system in St. Louis long before my trial. I never believed that I was going to walk up out of there. To be honest with you, I contemplated on jumping out the window. So, as far as hope, like I say, I would start believing in hope when these people decide to do the right thing and say, Mr. Dunn, you're free to go. Could I give hope a chance again in my life? You can't have hope, Jack, when your attorney do not defend you.
No. Did she say anything to you after that result, or was it a case of, just walked out?
Sure. Because, see, after the trial, they had what is known as an allocution stage. That's when the judge asks you, how do you feel about the representation of your attorney? I sat there and explained to him. My attorney didn't do diddly squat. They didn't do nothing for me. And I explained everything that my attorney failed to do. But the judge at the time, who was a black judge, he found whatever reason to make the decision that my attorney fell within the guidelines of her job and did not render her ineffective. So I had to appeal and appeal and appeal. Each time I was met with resistance. Each time they denied me.
So, at just 18 years of age, Christopher Dunn is found guilty and facing a life sentence with no parole. Chris says the feeling of anger is simply just an understatement.
I was filled with so much bitterness, so much hate, so much frustration. I lost hope. I felt like my life was over with. I didn't know what to do. Here it is. I'm housed in two of the worst prisons west of the Mississippi. One is known as Missouri State Penitentiary, which is the oldest prison west of the Mississippi, also known as the bloodiest 48 acres in the United States. The second one was Potosi Correctional Center, where they house death row inmates. Only death row and life without. When I first entered prison, the first thing the person told me is that I can't do your time for you. But because of who your brothers were, and because of who your dad were to us, the only thing I can do is give you this. They gave me a 1.3-inch knife and told me to walk around with it. I'm not going to be walking around with this thing. They told me not to get into or get involved in a number of activities that happen in prison, which is prison politics. First thing I did is ran straight to the law library. That's what I had to do. I was trying to find my way up out of prison.
Yeah.
I did not fit in with the prison life because I did not see this as being my world. But anybody in Missouri would tell you this. Prison is what you make it. It can be hard or it can be semi-soft. I lived right in the middle of both of them. I knew where I was at, but I knew I was not trying to stay here either.
Did the anger spill over every now and then? Did you ever get yourself written up or find yourself in the hole or any of those situations?
Sure. Don't get me wrong. Sure. I've had my times in the ASA, and I was rebellious. I was resentful. Sure, I fought against the system.
Yeah.
And I mean, I found myself inside ASA many a days. But after a while, you have to grow up and realize if you're trying to get out of prison, being an ASA is not the place to do it. Because you're limited by whatever resources that you can get down there. And I knew that nobody was going to fight for my freedom like me. So I had to figure out a better way to doing this time. Because I was not going to let this time do me anymore. So I figured it out. And I became a tutor. They kept me out the hole. I stayed in the library. They kept me out the hole. I saw myself start trying to help other people get out of prison. They gave me something to look forward to. I completed my education. So, and by doing other little projects, I had to do something to keep myself afloat. Anybody that goes to prison and say that they did not feel any of these things or they did not do any of these things is a person who did not live. They just existed. I lived. I felt the pain. The moment you don't feel the pain is the moment you just exist. You just here.
Chris, sitting in prison with no hope of release, has had denial after denial on all of his appeals. Until one day, he gets a letter that would give him a glimmer of hope.
Sometime back in 2004, I was housed at another institution. And while there, I received a letter from an inmate at another institution. I knew him because he worked in the law library. So I opened up the letter a little later on at night because I didn't think of opening my mail up right then and there. I wanted something at the end of the day to look forward to. So I waited until about 9:30 that night. Then I finally started to open up my mail. Once I opened it, I saw an affidavit that came from one of the witnesses. I was shocked. It was signed, notarized. I couldn't believe it. Then there was a small note in there from the person who sent it to me. And he explained to me how he came about this affidavit and how the young man came to him and asked him if he could send it to him. He said he wanted to right or wrong. I broke down right then and there. I contacted my wife now, which is Kira. I contacted her, and we talked about it. We ended up hiring an attorney. It took us a while to get the funds, to raise the funds up to hire the attorney, but we did. But we did not realize that we were going to need the other witness because it was just one witness. It was a 50-50 chance. And like I said, we didn't have the money for real. So this was our one shot. We could not file the motion just yet, which is known as a habeas corpus, a state habeas, not without the other witness. So it took us years to find the other witness. Then that attorney, her firm went under. So she no longer could represent me. So that was $10,000 that we didn't have anymore. Now, this same witness, he was willing to testify for me then, but he didn't even know where to locate the other witnesses. So we had to wait for an additional 10 years. So now, I mind you, 15 years has passed. But lo and behold, we raised the money up and we located the other witness 2,000 miles away in the state of California. And one of the investigators contacted him and recorded the statement. And he admitted to why he lied on me. He stated he never even saw the shooter, but he said that the only reason he accused me of it is because the first witness told him to say that it was me. We took that information, and after we raised the money for the second lawyer, ended up getting robbed by our attorney. Our attorney took over $35,000 from us and didn't do nothing with it. Then we raised some more money and got the third attorney. This time, we were successful in obtaining a hearing. So, May the 30th of 2018, in Texas County, Missouri, I sat in front of a judge with witness after witness after witness getting up on the stand to testify on my behalf as to where was I. Even the young woman that I was on the phone with, even the young man who put me in prison.
So why? Why did they say that Christopher Dunn was the trigger man that night?
Okay, that was a $100,000 question. Why me, out of all the people in the neighborhood? Now, this was the catch. In 2018, we didn't know the real reason. We only assumed until when the witness got on the stand in front of the court, in front of the judge, and gave the reason why. And get this, there was another young man who was a friend of the victim, who actually lived in the same household with the victim during the time when he was killed. He came forward. We didn't even know this witness existed. The judge, the prosecutor knew it, but they didn't want to use him because originally he told them that it wasn't Christopher Dunn who did the crime, that he saw the crime itself. So he got up there and he backed up the witness who put me in prison. He actually corroborated the same story. And they say that the reason they done so is because I told some people in my neighborhood not to sell drugs in front of my mother's home or the next door neighbor or either in front of the churches. One thing you didn't do, if somebody asked you to remove yourself from selling drugs in front of their house, that's what you did. No arguments about it. You did not sell drugs in front of the churches, nor in front of the schools during school hours. Those was no-nos. Now, whoever I told this to may have told them that, but the young man said in court is that I was pushing my weight around and I told people where they can and cannot sell drugs. So he told the judge in 2018 that he done so. He accused me of the crime to get me out of the way. He was hoping to win favors from the older guys in the neighborhood.
Well, so he admitted to lying in order to just get rid of you so that it might look good for him with other people in the neighborhood.
This is what he said. But he also had another agenda. He also had another reason, because 2 months after he accused me of doing this crime, he had multiple robberies. Just 2 months after, he said I did this. One in which he also shot a kid in the face, a 1-year-old baby in the face, and blinded him. 6 months after he committed that crime, he robbed a piece of delivery man. Now, you would think that a person like that would go to prison. The day of my trial was July the 15th. My trial attorney didn't show up the first day of my trial. The attorneys for the witnesses, they got up there and they made a deal to take the cases up under advisement that he had. The 7 robberies, the 9 counts of armed criminal actions, and the 2 assaults and a burglary. They took their case up under advisement only because they needed him to testify against me. Then, the case that he had for robbing a piece of delivery man is the case that they was giving him a deal for, which we found out later on. Now, he stated that they agreed to give him 15 years probation if he testified against me. Ironically, the judge decided to give him 3 years probation.
Wow. That's quite an incentive to testify against you, that's for sure.
It is. The judge declared that I met the standard of actually innocent. I met the gateway as well as the freestanding claim of actually innocent. However, due to a 2016 rule here in the state of Missouri, it's known as the Lincoln versus Cassidy decision, I did not meet the criteria to obtain my freedom because I was not a death row inmate.
This is not made up. A judge in open court said that Christopher Dunn meets all the criteria he needs to show that he is in fact factually innocent. However, the judge was unable to set him free because of a Missouri law that only allows courts to vacate convictions for death row inmates. The judge's hands were tied by a ruling from 2016 Missouri Supreme Court that only allows death row inmates to make a freestanding claim of innocence. Now, if you're utterly confused by all of this, don't worry, as was I. So, Michael Leonard, you're getting an early call up here, mate. Please explain.
Yeah, so the crazy thing is in the state of Missouri, the courts have held that if you're not on death row, your claim of innocence is going to be treated differently than if you are on death row. So, for example, a death row detainee in the state of Missouri could make a claim of actual innocence. I didn't do it, have a hearing type procedure and prove that they didn't commit the crime and get released. However, the Missouri Supreme Court has held that, look, if you're not on death row, you can't make that claim. Does that make any sense? Is that any modicum of justice? Of course not. So they're fighting to find that law. It looks like there's been unsuccessful attempts to change the law. I think the only saving grace in Missouri is that a prosecutor can initiate a proceeding where the prosecutor argues to the court that the person is actually innocent.
Essentially, in layman's terms, utter lunacy.
It is. But see, even the saddest part about the whole situation was that when the judge, he went on to say that there is no jury that will convict me with the evidence that exists today. However, until a higher court in our land or either the 8th Circuit overturns the Lincoln versus Cassidy decision, that I must remain inside the Missouri Department of Correction. That was ludicrous. His hands was tied. He couldn't do nothing. But now, Jack, we found something else. I have an attorney out of New York who came forward to assist my attorneys in Kansas City because the Innocent Project now is a part of the team. So, with their backing and with the backing and support of the previous circuit attorney who had to step down in Missouri, the new circuit attorney, his support validated it. He too asked them to vacate my sentence. So now I am being given another hearing, which would occur in May sometime. So I will have to go back to court, just as Lamar Johnson, just as Kevin Strickland, the first of the two Missouri 3. And I will have to sit there and go through the same ordeal over again to see if this new judge will set me free.
So yes, Chris has had another day in court, and as you may have heard him mention, he has the backing of the St. Louis Circuit Attorney. The St. Louis Prosecutor's Office came forward to ask the courts to set him free, as even they are now convinced he's telling the truth. A Missouri law adopted in 2021 allows prosecutors to request such hearings when they see evidence of wrongful conviction. St. Louis Circuit Attorney Gabe Gore filed a motion in February seeking to vacate the 1990 guilty verdict, citing, and I quote, clear and convincing evidence of Christopher Dunn's actual innocence.
Well, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney says a man who has been in prison since 1991 should be set free. Gabe Gore filed a petition today to vacate the murder conviction of Christopher Dunn.
We obtained some expert testimony, an expert report that I think is going to be very helpful in terms of supporting the recantations of the witnesses in terms of explaining why the identifications that they testified to at trial would in fact be very difficult and unlikely.
So why on earth is he not just being released? Well, lawyers from the Missouri Attorney General's office want him kept behind bars. And they are now not only fighting Chris's team, but also the prosecutor's office. Assistant Attorney General Tristan Estep said neither police nor prosecutors coerced the witnesses to testify against Dunn, and evidence will show he was the shooter regardless of how their stories have changed. He says, and I quote, over the past 34 years, Christopher Dunn has crafted a story, but not a convincing one. The fact that these people are in the positions of power that they are is utterly terrifying.
Like I say, I'm not here to badger the Attorney General. I'm not. Understand he has a job to do. Understand that he represents the state. So I'm not going to sit here and try to badger him and talk bad to him or talk bad about him and try to get people to go against him. He has a job to do. All I'm asking for is just like with your listeners, it's a chance. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I'm actually innocent, that I deserve my freedom. That's all. That's all I'm asking for is a fair shake. Give me today what I didn't have 34 years ago, an opportunity to prove it.
Yeah, so I mean, so when we look at this, hearing that you have in May, what's best case scenario?
Best case scenario, Jack, is that when we have this hearing, the judge will listen to all the evidence again and make his decision that I'm actually innocent and free me. Free me within that day or either within 30 days from that day.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario is that he say that he do not believe it. And if that's the case, then back to the drawing board.
Understandably, after over 3 decades behind bars, Christopher Dunn is a tired man.
I get tired of being counted. I get tired of being told when I can and can't go to sleep. I get tired of walking up and down the same corridors. I get tired of seeing the exact same people every day telling me the exact same story that they told me for the past 10, 15, 20 years. I get tired of seeing the same thing constantly, over and over, generation after generation. I have started to see now the friends that I grew up with, their children are now prisoners. Their prisoners, their children are now doing time next to me. I get tired of having to watch younger officers come into the prisons and then tell me what I need to do or what I better do. Only thing I can do, though, is make every day count. Talking to you so you can pass on this message in the event that I die in prison. Jack, I done had 3 heart attacks since I've been in prison. The first one, I was gone for 4 minutes and 13 seconds. That was in 2019. I didn't even know I was having a heart attack. I didn't realize the symptoms. It felt like my arm was on fire, like it was on fire and being stabbed with 100 butcher knives. I would have done anything for them to decapitate my left arm. That's how bad it hurted. When they placed me in a helicopter and did a medical evac, and I got a chance to look to the side and look over and see myself floating, I never thought I'd see that image again. But I did. 2 more times did I have a heart attack. I done had an aneurysm since I've been in prison. I'd have been stabbed in prison because a friend of mine, younger brother, came to prison from my old neighborhood, the same exact neighborhood where I got locked up at. His brother came to prison and got into it with some guys. And me standing in the way, trying to alleviate the problems, I stood there like a fool and got stabbed, not paying attention to the signs. But I done this not because of the friend that I had who was an older brother of his, but because of my friend's mother who treated me like her son. I didn't want her child to die in prison. So I thought that I could try to resolve the problem. I almost lost my life 4 times since I've been in prison. I'm 52. I'm about to turn 53. I've been in prison ever since I've been 18. I get tired, believe me, I do. But just because they sentenced me to remain in prison for something I didn't do, that doesn't mean that I still can't live. So what I do, I try to make every day count. Like I say, Jack, I try not to hold an if ill will in my heart anymore. I lived a long time being hateful and being mad and being upset, being angry and frustrated. But then nobody in this situation, and nobody in this prison put me in this situation. So it makes no sense for me to wake up every day and become angry and frustrated with them. I try to smile every day now because I don't know if I'm going to be gone tomorrow. I want the world to remember me as smiling, as being happy. So I thank people like you for giving me something to smile about.
You have 1 minute remaining.
As I finalise putting this episode together to release it to you, there has still been no judgment on whether or not Christopher Dunn will be freed.
A decision on Dunn's future won't be made today. The presiding judge in this case will now take the next several weeks to review everything that was testified to over the past several days before issuing a written decision. At this time, it's unclear when that decision will be released.
However, I do hope to speak to Christopher in the coming days to find out how he felt throughout the entire process of those 2 days. And of course, hoping to bring you some good news about his case very soon. 1 Minute Remaining is a Mashed Pumpkin production, created, hosted and produced by Jack Lawrence. Audio and sound design by Jack Lawrence and Dom Evans of Earsay.